cold, sterile air of the hospital room wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, but it was nothing compared to the icy grip of fear squeezing my heart. My husband, Brandon, lay motionless on the bed, tubes and wires snaking from his body to the machines that kept him alive, or at least, kept him from dying. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room, a cruel reminder that his heart still beat even though everything else seemed lost. But it wasn't the sight of my husband lying there, pale and lifeless, that made my blood run cold. It was the venom in my mother-in-law's voice, the look in her eyes, as she pointed an accusatory finger at me. "This is all your fault, Sophia," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "If you had been a better wife, this never would have happened." Her words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of me. I stared at her, unable to speak, unable to defend myself against the accusation. How had it come to this? Just a few short months ago, we were celebrating our second wedding anniversary, and now I was being blamed for my husband's condition, for the fact that he was lying in this hospital bed, caught between life and death. My vision blurred as tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I couldn't afford to cry, not here, not now. I had to stay strong, for Brandon, for myself. But the guilt gnawed at me, a relentless ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. Was it my fault? Had I somehow failed him? Brandon had always been the ambitious one, the dreamer with big plans and even bigger ideas. When he left his stable job to pursue a career as a freelance interior coordinator, I supported him wholeheartedly. I believed in him, in his talent, in his vision. But things hadn't gone as planned. The business struggled from the start, and with every passing day, the light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something darker, resentment, anger, and eventually, hatred. He became a man I no longer recognized, a shadow of the person I fell in love with. The verbal abuse began slowly, almost imperceptibly, a snide remark here, a sarcastic comment there. But it escalated quickly, becoming a daily assault on my self-worth. "You're useless, Sophia," he would say, his voice dripping with contempt. "You don't support me. You don't understand what I'm going through." His words cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. I found myself shrinking into silence, trying to become invisible just to avoid his wrath. But no matter how much I tried to please him, it was never enough. And then, the accident happened. At least, that's what I was led to believe. Brandon was involved in a horrific traffic accident, or so I was told. The doctors said he was in a vegetative state, and I watched in helpless agony as my husband's life slipped through my fingers. But even as I sat by his bedside, praying for a miracle, my mother-in-law's accusations grew louder, more vicious. "This is your fault," she would scream, her face contorted with rage. "If you had been a better wife, this never would have happened." The weight of her words crushed me. I began to believe them. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe if I had been more supportive, more understanding, Brandon wouldn't be lying in this hospital bed, trapped in a state between life and death. Guilt gnawed at me, and I spent my days and nights in a haze of despair. Then, one day, everything changed. A visiting doctor had come to examine Brandon. His face was impassive as he checked the monitors, his eyes unreadable. I watched him from the corner of the room, anxiety coiling in my stomach. When he finished, he looked at me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "Mrs. Sophia, could you step into the other room for a moment?" he asked, his voice calm yet urgent. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. I braced myself for the worst. Had Brandon's condition worsened? Was he going to die? But what the doctor told me was something I could never have anticipated. "Call this number immediately," he said, pressing a small slip of paper into my trembling hand. His voice dropped to a whisper as he leaned closer. "Your husband isn't in a vegetative state. He's fully conscious. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Fully conscious. My mind raced, my body trembling uncontrollably. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. But the doctor's eyes were deadly serious. Your husband has been faking it, he continued, his words hitting me like a freight train. I believe there's more going on here than you know. I staggered back, my world spinning. Faking it? How could this be possible? My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. I had to get out, had to think. I bolted out of the room, my mind racing with 1,000 questions and no answers. As I drove aimlessly through the city, the doctor's words echoed in my mind. Fully conscious. Faking it. I couldn't believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. Brandon's mother had always been controlling, always trying to dictate every aspect of his life. And now, with Brandon supposedly in a vegetative state, she had complete control. But why? What was the point of this elaborate charade? I decided to call the number the doctor had given me. The phone rang only once before a man answered. Sophia. His voice was familiar, yet unfamiliar at the same time. Yes, I replied hesitantly. Who is this? It's Mark, Brandon's brother. My breath caught in my throat. Mark? Brandon's older brother had been estranged from the family for years. I had never met him, but I had heard stories of a man who was headstrong, independent, and unwilling to bend to the will of their domineering mother. Why was he involved? We need to talk, Mark said, his tone urgent. There's something you need to know about Brandon, about everything. I met Mark later that evening at a small cafe, in a quiet part of town. He looked like an older version of Brandon, but there was a hardness in his eyes that I hadn't seen in my husband. He wasted no time getting to the point. Brandon's been lying to you, he began, his voice low and steady. He's not in a vegetative state. He's been faking it, with the help of our mother. I stared at Mark, my mind reeling. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Brandon had been faking his condition. But why? And more importantly, how? It's a long story, Mark continued, reading the confusion on my face. But it boils down to this: Brandon's business was failing, and he didn't want to admit it. Our mother convinced him to fake the accident and the vegetative state to get sympathy, and more importantly, to get money from you. Money. The word slipped out before I could stop it. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, and I struggled to make sense of what Mark was telling me. This was all about money. Mark nodded grimly. She knew you were the successful one, that you had the means to support them. And it worked, didn't it? You've been paying for everything since the accident. I felt a sickening sensation in the pit of my stomach. I had been so blinded by guilt, so overwhelmed by my own emotions, that I hadn't seen what was right in front of me. They had used me, manipulated me, and I had fallen for it completely. But there's more, Mark said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Brandon isn't just faking the coma. He's been seeing someone else, a younger woman. They've been meeting at our parents' house, while you've been working and taking care of everything. I felt the world tilt on its axis. Not only had Brandon been lying about his condition, but he was also cheating on me. The betrayal was too much to bear. I felt anger rising in me, a burning fury that I had never felt before. What do I do? I asked, my voice trembling with rage and pain. We need to expose them, Mark said firmly. But you need to be careful. My mother will do anything to protect Brandon, even if it means destroying you. But we can turn this around. We can make sure they pay for what they've done. Over the next few days, Mark and I devised a plan. I had already been gathering evidence, saving every abusive message, every financial transaction. But now, with Mark's help, I started collecting more. We set up hidden cameras in Brandon's hospital room, recorded conversations, and documented every suspicious activity. Then, the day came to confront them. I returned to my in-laws' house, but this time, I wasn't alone. Mark was with me, along with a couple of police officers who had been briefed on the situation. As I walked through the door, I felt a cold determination settle over me. This was it. This was the moment I would take back control of my life. My mother-in-law was in the living room when we entered, sitting by Brandon's bed, her face a mask of concern. But I could see the truth now. It was all an act. "Sophia, where have you been?" she asked, her voice sharp with irritation. "You're supposed to be taking care of your husband." I stared at her for a moment, letting the silence hang in the air. The woman who had berated me, who had blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in her precious son's life, was sitting there with that same cold, calculating look. But now I saw through it all. I saw the fear behind her eyes, the panic that she was trying to mask with anger. "Enough," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I know the truth." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, but her voice was shaky. "The lies, the deception, the fake coma," Mark said coldly, stepping forward. "It's all over. The police are here, and we have all the evidence we need." Brandon, who had been pretending to sleep, suddenly sat up, his face pale. "Sophia, wait, let me explain," he pleaded, his voice trembling. But I had no intention of listening. "Explain what?" I snapped, feeling the anger I had bottled up for so long finally surge to the surface. "How you pretended to be in a coma to manipulate me. How you cheated on me while I was doing everything to support you. There's nothing you can say that will make this right." The police officers moved forward, but before they could say anything, my mother-in-law finally broke. "Please, you don't understand," she cried, her voice high-pitched and desperate. "We did this for Brandon. He was losing everything, his career, his reputation. We just wanted to help him get back on his feet. By faking a coma." Mark's voice was cold, unforgiving. "By deceiving everyone, by hurting Sophia. How could you possibly think this was the right thing to do?" "She's right," Brandon suddenly blurted out, his voice frantic. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't know what else to do. I was losing everything, and I felt like a failure. Mom said this would give me time, that it would take the pressure off, that you would help us, Sophia. I never meant for it to get so out of control." I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So you thought lying to me, pretending to be in a coma, and letting your mother manipulate me was the solution? And what about the affair, Brandon? Was that also part of your plan to get back on your feet?" Brandon's face turned ashen, and he looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "It was a mistake," he mumbled. "I was just so angry, so frustrated. I didn't know how to deal with everything. I needed to feel in control, and Belle, she..." "You disgust me," I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I trusted you. I stood by you, and this is how you repay me. By deceiving me, by making me feel guilty, by cheating on me." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't show any more weakness, not in front of these people who had treated me so cruelly. I had to stay strong, for myself, for the future I was going to build without them. "Please, Sophia," Brandon begged, his voice breaking. "Don't leave me. I'll do anything to make this right. I was wrong, I know that now. Just give me another chance." I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I saw was a man who had lost everything, his dignity, his integrity, his soul. There was nothing left of the man I had once loved. The man standing before me was a stranger, someone I no longer knew, and someone I no longer wanted in my life. "I'm done, Brandon," I said, my voice firm. "I want a divorce." My mother-in-law gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. "You can't do that," she cried. "You're his wife. You're supposed to stand by him, to support him." "I did," I replied, my voice icy. "But he betrayed that trust. He betrayed me. And now I'm walking away." The police officers stepped forward, ready to take Brandon and his mother into custody. I watched as they were led away, my heart heavy but resolute. This was the end of a chapter in my life, a chapter that had been filled with pain, betrayal, and deception. But it was also the beginning of something new, something better. I would rebuild my life, free from the lies and the pain, and I would do it on my own terms. As I walked out of the house, Mark by my side, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and ready to take control of my future. "Thank you," I said to Mark as we reached the car. "For everything." He nodded, his expression serious. "I'm just glad you're free of them now. You deserve so much better, Sophia." I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in what felt like forever. "I know. And I'm going to make sure I get it." Over the next few weeks, I focused on getting my life back on track. The divorce was finalized quickly, with Mark's help, and I made sure to cut all ties with Brandon and his family. The investigation revealed the full extent of their deceit, including the tax evasion that led to the closure of their medical practice. They were left with nothing, their lives in ruins. As for me, I returned to my parents' home, where I was welcomed with open arms. I continued my work as an interior designer, but with a new sense of purpose. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side stronger, wiser. I wouldn't let anyone take advantage of me again. Brandon and his family may have tried to destroy me, but in the end, they only destroyed themselves. I would rebuild my life, free from the lies and the pain, and I would do it on my own terms. And as for Brandon's mistress, she was left to deal with the consequences of her actions, burdened with debt and a ruined reputation. It was a fitting end for someone who thought she could take what was mine. In the end, justice was served. I may have been hurt, but I wasn't broken. I would rise again, stronger than ever. Life after the divorce wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness threatened to overwhelm me, when the memories of happier times haunted my dreams. But each morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of determination. I refused to let the past define me. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects, challenging myself in ways I never had before. My reputation as an interior designer grew, and soon, I was in demand, not just for my skills, but for my resilience, my ability to turn adversity into something beautiful. I found solace in the support of my parents, who had been my rock through everything. They never pried, never asked for details, but their quiet presence was a constant comfort. They had always believed in me, even when I doubted myself, and now, I was starting to believe in myself again too. As the months passed, the pain of Brandon's betrayal began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace. I had survived something that could have broken me, and that knowledge gave me strength. I started to see the world in a different light, appreciating the small moments of joy that I had once taken for granted. A cup of coffee in the morning, the warmth of the sun on my face, the laughter of friends, these were the things that mattered, the things that made life worth living. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the chaos of my marriage. They welcomed me back with open arms, offering support and encouragement as I rebuilt my life. It was through them that I met someone new, someone who would eventually become a significant part of my life. His name was Alex, a fellow designer who had gone through his own share of hardships. We met at a networking event, where we bonded over our love for design and our shared experiences of overcoming personal challenges. There was something different about Alex, something genuine and kind. He didn't push, didn't try to force a connection. He simply let things unfold naturally, allowing me the space to heal and grow at my own pace. Our friendship deepened over time, and eventually, it blossomed into something more. With Alex, there were no games, no deceit, just honesty, respect, and a deep mutual understanding. He knew about my past, about the pain I had endured, and he never judged me for it. Instead, he admired my strength, my determination to move forward. And in turn, I admired his resilience, his ability to see the beauty in life even after everything he had been through. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. I had found someone who appreciated me for who I was, someone who supported my dreams without expecting anything in return. And I had found myself again, the strong, independent woman I had always been, but had forgotten in the midst of all the chaos. Together, Alex and I started our own design firm, combining our talents to create something truly unique. It was a venture born out of passion, out of a desire to build something that reflected who we were, both as individuals and as a team. The business flourished, and soon, we were working on projects that we could have only dreamed of before. But more than the success, it was the journey that mattered. The journey of healing, of rediscovering my worth, of finding love and happiness in the most unexpected places. I had been through so much, but in the end, it had all led me to where I was meant to be. As I stood in our new office one evening, looking out at the city skyline, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The past would always be a part of me, a chapter in my life that had shaped who I was. But it was just that, a chapter. The story was far from over, and I was excited to see where it would take me next. Brandon and his family had tried to bring me down, to destroy everything I had worked for. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't just a victim of their deceit. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Life would continue to throw challenges my way, but I knew I could handle them. I had faced the worst and had come out victorious. And now, I was ready to embrace whatever the future held, with open arms and an open heart. Because in the end, it wasn't about the pain or the betrayal. It was about how I had risen above it all, how I had taken control of my life and created something beautiful out of the ashes. And that, more than anything else, was the greatest victory of all.